Okay, so a recent Supreme Court decision has just completely upended American trade policy. It's kicked off this frantic scramble in Washington, and believe it or not, it all comes down to a deceptively simple but incredibly tight deadline. 150 days. That's it. That is how long the current U.S. tariff structure has before it just automatically vanishes. And look, this isn't some theoretical thing. It's a hard stop. And it is forcing a massive strategic shift that goes way, way beyond just import taxes. So here's what you need to know. When the Supreme Court knocked out the old tariffs, the administration had to find a legal plan B, and fast. They dug one up, an old law called Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. But there's a catch, right? This law comes with a built-in self-destruct button.
Let's just quickly trace how we got here. On February 20th, the old authority gets struck down. Just 4 days later, the new temporary tariffs are slapped into place. But that's when the clock started ticking, leading to that hard deadline of July 24th, when poof, they're just gone.
Now, you're probably thinking, okay, why not just get Congress to extend them? Well, that's where politics gets in the way. Most people who follow this stuff agree it's a total non-starter. You've got midterm elections coming up. Polls consistently show voters are against tariffs by about 2-1. Trying to push an extension through a divided Congress, it's seen as pretty much impossible.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. House Speaker Mike Johnson himself said getting a consensus would be a challenge. Now, in Washington speak, that is a massive, massive understatement. It just highlights how temporary these things really are.
So if they can't extend them, what is the plan? Well, the administration is pitching this 150-day window as a transitional bridge. Think of it like a temporary patch. It's designed to keep the pressure on while they build a much more permanent and, frankly, much more powerful policy structure behind the scenes. And this right here, this really gets to the core of their strategy. On one side, you have what they're using now, Section 122. It's temporary, it's broad, it's capped at 15%. On the other side, that's the goal. Using Sections 301 and 232 to build something that's durable, targeted, with no rate cap, and, this is key, backed by formal investigations. It's a total shift from using a sledgehammer to using a scalpel. So how do they build this new thing? Okay, the first tool in the toolbox is Section 232. This one is all about national security. The Commerce Department has to launch a formal investigation, build a whole case with evidence to prove that imports of a certain product, say steel or maybe advanced robotics, threaten U.S. security. If they can prove it, then the president has the green light to impose some serious long-term tariffs.
The second tool is Section 301. This one is aimed at unfair trade practices. Think of a country flooding the market with super cheap goods or using forced labor. The U.S. Trade Representative, the USTR, runs an investigation, gets public comments, and basically builds a case to show a country isn't playing by the rules. And if they're not, Section 301 gives the U.S. the power to hit back.
All right, so all of this is setting up a really high-stakes moment for late July. When that 150-day clock finally runs out, one of three things is going to happen, and each one has completely different consequences for global trade. Okay, first, the ideal scenario. The bridge strategy works perfectly. The new, permanent, targeted tariffs just snap into place the second the old ones expire. Scenario 2? That's the messy one. The investigations take too long, the tariffs just die, and you get chaos in the markets. And then there's the big gamble, Scenario 3. The administration tries to restart the clock, declares a new emergency, and starts another 150 days, a move that would absolutely trigger a huge legal fight. But here's the thing. What if this whole frantic 150-day countdown isn't the main story at all? What if it's just the opening act for something much, much bigger?
Because get this, that July 24th deadline wasn't picked out of a hat. It lands on the exact same day as the mandatory 6-year review of the big North American trade deal, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. That's not a coincidence, it's a strategy. That tariff clock is basically the opening bell for the real main event. The U.S. is using the pressure of this deadline to push for a fundamental rewrite of the rules for the entire North American trade bloc. The endgame here is to win massive concessions and totally reshape the economic relationship with its two biggest trading partners. The first big demand is all about what it means for something to be made in North America.
The U.S. wants to kill this rolling up loophole. It's basically a way that foreign parts can get treated as North American content. They also want brand new strict rules for all the critical materials in the EV supply chain and much tougher standards for steel and aluminum.
And for the auto industry, they have a very specific number in mind, 85%. That's the new target for how much of a car's value has to come from North America to get zero tariffs. That's a really big jump from the current 75%.
Yeah, this table really puts it all in perspective. Under the old NAFTA deal, the auto rule was 62.5%. USMCA bumped it to 75%. Now they're pushing for 85%, plus stricter tracing. And you see that same kind of escalation right down the line, from labor rules to steel standards to forcing open Canada's dairy market. The second set of demands is pure geopolitics, and it is all about China. The U.S. is demanding that both Canada and Mexico get their customs and investment screening rules in line with American standards. The goal here is pretty clear: build a unified economic fortress and slam shut any backdoor China might try to use to get around U.S. tariffs. Pillar 3 is all about labor. The U.S. wants to beef up the existing tools for enforcing worker rights, but they also want to tie that $16 an hour wage rule for auto workers to inflation and even start talking about a continent-wide minimum wage for certain industries, all to level the playing field. And finally, Pillar 4 gets right into some very specific domestic policies. The U.S. is demanding that Mexico walk back energy reforms that favor its own state-run companies over private American ones. And from Canada, it's some of the classics: fully open up its heavily protected dairy market, and back off on taxes aimed at American tech companies. So that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? That tariff clock is ticking down to a deadline that's really just the starting line for a much bigger fight. Will this high-stakes push actually create a stronger, more competitive North America? Or is it going to backfire and trigger a massive trade standoff between three economies that are just so deeply connected? The next few months, well, they're going to decide everything.